What you're looking at isn't a crime scene. Not yet. It's a beach. The date is April 6th, 1930. The place is Dandi, India. And this man, Mohandas Gandhi, is about to commit a crime with a single pinch of salt that will bring the most powerful empire on earth to its knees. He reaches down. His fingers press into the wet, gritty sand. And as he lifts a small clump of natural, unrefined sea salt, he holds in his hand something illegal. Contraband. A crime punishable by arrest. But how? How did this simple, everyday mineral, the stuff you sprinkle on your fries, become the secret key to building empires, funding armies, and controlling the world? The story of salt isn't about flavor. It's the story of power. And it reveals a terrifying blueprint for how to control humanity. To understand how a rock you can eat becomes a weapon, you have to start with a single microbe, a bacterium. Imagine it sitting on a fresh piece of meat or fish. Its goal is simple: divide and conquer. It wants to break down the flesh, to rot it from the inside out. To do that, it needs water. Water is the fuel for all life, even the microscopic life that causes decay. Now introduce salt. Sodium chloride. The salt crystal doesn't fight the microbe with poison. It does something far more clever. It steals its water. Through a process called osmosis, the high concentration of salt literally sucks the water molecules right out of the bacterium's cell walls. The microbe shrivels. It becomes inert. It can't multiply. The rot just stops. Time itself seems to pause inside that piece of meat. What was once a ticking clock of decay, a perishable breath that would be gone in days, has now become winter in a barrel, tomorrow in a jar. This wasn't just a neat science trick. This was magic. It was the technology that allowed humanity to cheat death, to survive winters, to cross oceans. And once we knew the secret, we re-engineered the planet to get more of it. On sun-scorched coasts, we built salterns, vast, shallow ponds that looked like giant mirrors reflecting the sky. We'd let seawater flood in, and then let the sun and wind do the hard work, boiling the water away day by day, leaving behind a crust of pure white crystals. Inland, where there was no ocean, our ancestors found brine springs, salty water bubbling up from deep within the earth. During the Iron Age, they poured this brine into simple ceramic molds, archaeologists call them briquettage, and boiled it over fires for hours. The entire room would fill with a thick, metallic-smelling steam, and at the end, they would break the mold to reveal a hard cake of salt. This was humanity's first manufactured good. But in some places, you didn't need the sun or fire. The earth itself was the salt. In Poland, miners descended into the Wieliczka salt mine, a place that feels like an underground cathedral made of shimmering crystal. From the 13th century onward, the galleries echoed with the ring of picks against rock salt or halite. They carved out entire chapels, statues, chandeliers, all from the rock they were there to mine. It was a city beneath the earth, a testament to how vital this mineral was. And then there was the desert. In the heart of the Sahara, at a place called Tagaza, the ground itself was made of salt. For centuries, men toiled under an unforgiving sun, cutting massive slabs of salt directly from the desert floor. They stacked them like pale, heavy tombstones, their lips chapped raw by the salt-laced wind. Why go to all this trouble? Because with enough salt, you could build an army. You could build an empire. Before refrigeration, logistics was destiny. A general couldn't move his army further than his food supply would allow. And that food supply was perishable. But with salt, everything changed. Suddenly, you could pack barrels with salted cod, salted beef, salted everything. Bacalhau and bully beef. This wasn't gourmet food, this was the fuel of conquest. You can practically hear the wooden hoops on the barrels creaking in the belly of a Roman galley or a British man-o'-war as a quartermaster counts provisions not in weeks, but in winters. Salted food gave navies the power to stay at sea for months, to blockade enemy ports, to project power across the globe. The Romans knew this better than anyone. They didn't just use salt, they built their civilization around it. Look at the Via Salaria, Rome's original salt road. This ancient highway wasn't just a path, it was a strategic artery, pumping salt from the coastal pans at Ostia into the heart of the growing city. Now, there's a popular myth that Roman legionaries were paid directly in salt. They weren't. But the myth exists for a reason. Salt was so fundamental to the Roman economy, so critical for preserving food for the citizens and the legions, that the state controlled its transport and sale. The word we use for our paycheck, salary, comes from the Latin word salarium. It originally referred to the money given to soldiers to buy their portion of the state-controlled salt. The word itself is a fossil, a linguistic scab reminding us of a logistical truth. Control the salt, control the food. Control the food, control the people. And it didn't take long for states to realize, if everyone needs it, you can tax it. In 119 BCE, Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty in China was facing a massive problem. He was fighting a costly, bloody war against the nomadic Xiongnu tribes on his northern frontier. Wars cost money. A lot of money. So his administration did something revolutionary. They declared a state monopoly on two essential commodities: iron, for tools and weapons, and salt. Overnight, every grain of salt produced and sold in the vast Han Empire belonged to the government. The profits, once going to private merchants, now flowed directly into the state treasury, funding the very armies that were protecting the borders. Not everyone was happy about this. By 81 BCE, the imperial court was rocked by a fierce debate, recorded for history as the discourses on salt and iron. Scholars argued that the state was being greedy, that taxing a daily necessity was immoral, and was starving the common people just to feed its war machine. Does that debate sound familiar? It should. It's the same argument we have today about taxes on gas, food, and energy. It's an ancient dilemma. When does a tax become an act of oppression? China's rulers learned their lesson. After a devastating rebellion in the 8th century nearly shattered the Tang dynasty, the court turned to salt to save itself. In 758, a shrewd administrator named Liu Yan created a nationwide salt monopoly that was so efficient, so profitable, it became the financial backbone of the Chinese state for the next 1,000 years. Later, during the Ming and Qing dynasties, the government controlled the salt trade through licenses, little slips of paper called yanin that gave a merchant the exclusive right to sell salt in a specific region. These paper licenses became fantastically valuable, turning salt merchants into some of the wealthiest people in the empire. This blueprint, control salt, get rich, get powerful, was copied across the world. Take Venice. We think of Venice as a city of art and canals, but its power was built on salt. The Venetians controlled the salt pans along the Adriatic coast, at places like Servia and Chioggia. They used their powerful navy to dominate the salt trade throughout the Mediterranean. They would sell the salt crystals and use the profits to buy the oak and iron needed to build even more ships for their navy. A lagoon of worthless brine became an arsenal. An empire of trade, built one grain at a time. But if salt could build an empire, the lack of it could inspire a revolution. In France, for centuries, the king imposed a hated salt tax called the gabelle. The tax was brutally unfair. The price of salt varied wildly from region to region. Some areas paid 50 or 60 times more than others. Everyone was required by law to buy a certain amount of this overpriced, state-mandated salt. You couldn't even use seawater to cook your food. That was illegal. The tax became a symbol of everything that was wrong with the corrupt monarchy. An entire black market sprung up, run by brave smugglers called faussaires, who would risk everything to smuggle cheaper salt into the highly taxed regions. If they were caught by the hated tax collectors, the gabelous, the punishments were horrific: branding, public whipping, being sent to the galleys as a slave, even death. By 1789, the French people had had enough. The rage over the gabelle was one of the sparks that lit the fire of the French Revolution. It was so hated that it wasn't fully abolished across all of France until 1945. It took 2 world wars to finally kill that tax. Salt wasn't just a commodity to be taxed. In some places, it was the money itself. Across the Sahara, the great camel caravans that linked North Africa to the wealthy kingdoms of the south carried slabs of salt cut from desert mines like to Gaza. Those gray-white slabs were traded for gold, ivory, and slaves. An ounce of salt for an ounce of gold. And in Ethiopia, right up into the 19th century, people used standardized bars of salt, called a mole, as their currency. Think about that. Not a coin with a king's face on it, but solidified necessity, passing from hand to hand as value. But to truly understand why salt holds this incredible power over us, we have to look deeper. Not into history books or economic ledgers, but inside our own bodies. Inside our own brains. You see, you need salt to live. Specifically, you need sodium. Every single nerve impulse in your body, every thought you have, every beat of your heart, is powered by a tiny electrical charge created by sodium and potassium ions moving across your cell membranes. Without sodium, you stop thinking. Your heart stops beating. You die. Your body knows this. And it has evolved an incredibly powerful survival program to make sure you never run out. When your body runs low on sodium, your brain flips a series of emergency switches. Special channels on your tongue, called enosine channels, become hypersensitive to the taste of salt. At the same time, deep in your brain, hormones like aldosterone and angiotensin II go to work, priming regions like the lamina terminalis and the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of your brain. The result? The very taste of salt changes. What might normally taste harsh or unpleasantly salty suddenly becomes irresistible. Delicious. Your body literally writes an emergency order in the language of pleasure. The craving you feel isn't a weakness. It's a multi-million-year-old survival algorithm screaming at you to find that one rock you cannot live without. Ancient empires may not have known the specific hormones, but they knew the craving was real. They knew it was universal. They just learned how to invoice it. And modern industry learned how to hijack it. Food technologists today are masters of this ancient script. They can tune the grain size of salt crystals and precisely calculate their dissolve curves to hit your tongue in a specific way that blunts any bitterness in food, releases a burst of aroma, and sends a signal of pure pleasure straight to your brain. They're searching for the bliss point. It's the precise amount of salt, sugar, and fat that makes a food scientifically irresistible. It's why you can't eat just one potato chip. Most of the salt we eat today isn't what we sprinkle from a shaker. It's hidden inside processed foods, put there by scientists who are reverse engineering our own biology to sell more products. The World Health Organization recommends we eat less than 5 grams of salt a day. Most of us eat double that. And so the very same mineral that once saved us from rot and starvation now echoes in the squeeze of a blood pressure cuff. An ancient preservative has become a modern problem. So let's go back to that beach. April 6, 1930. The British Empire, rulers of India, had their own gabelle. A salt tax. They made it illegal for any Indian to produce or sell their own salt. Indians had to buy heavily taxed salt from the British government, salt that was often imported all the way from Liverpool. It was absurd. It was humiliating. It was the perfect symbol of a foreign power controlling the most basic necessities of Indian life. Gandhi saw the power in that symbol. He decided to walk 240 miles from his ashram to the sea at Dandi. As he walked, a trickle of followers became a stream, and then a river of people tens of thousands strong. By the time he reached the sea, the world was watching. And when he bent down and picked up that illegal pinch of salt, it was an act of profound defiance. It was a declaration that the Indian people would take back control of their own bodies, their own kitchens, their own country. Inspired by his act, thousands of Indians along the coast began illegally making their own salt, setting out pans to evaporate seawater in the sun. The British responded with force. Over 60,000 people, including Gandhi himself, were arrested. But it was too late. The empire's authority was broken. The image of British police beating peaceful protesters for the crime of making salt horrified the world. The empire's revenue model, built on pricing and necessity, had suddenly turned brittle. An empire that feared a pinch of salt had revealed its own weakness. So what's the pattern here? It's a three-way intersection where physics, politics, and biology meet. The physics of osmosis stops time and preserves our food. Biology creates a deep-wired, irresistible craving for that preservative. And politics sees that universal need and realizes it can be controlled, taxed, and weaponized. Control that junction, and you control everything. Kitchens, armies, treasuries, and even our own cravings. Think about the quiet relief you feel when you sprinkle salt on a fresh tomato. The way the flavor suddenly blossoms, the edges soften, and it tastes more like itself. That small, personal moment of relief is a direct echo of the relief a Roman quartermaster felt, seeing his barrels of salted beef and knowing his army would survive the winter. It's the same biological certainty that empires tried to tax into obedience. The fingerprints of this long history are all over your life right now. The salt shaker in your kitchen is a direct descendant of those Iron Age brine boilers and Venetian salt pans. The snack aisle in your grocery store is a modern laboratory speaking fluently to the ancient reward circuits in your brain. And your doctor's concern about your blood pressure is the unintended, modern coda to this ancient, life-saving technology. The story of salt is a mirror. We inherit the same dilemmas every time we vote on taxes for essential goods like fuel or water. We are still arguing about the price of survival. Return to Dandi one last time. Feel those crystals, like tiny bones of the sea, falling through Gandhi's fingers. It was just a pinch of salt, a small sound, and an entire empire flinched. It proves that sometimes the biggest truths about power, freedom, and what it means to be human can be found in the smallest things. Now, the history of salt is wild, but it's not the only everyday item with a secret history that controls our world. The video that's waiting for you on the end screen explores another one, and trust me, its story is even crazier. Click on that right now to continue the investigation. And before you go, I have to know, what's the one food you absolutely cannot eat without salt? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what you'll say. And if you want your daily dose of history that reveals the hidden forces that shape our lives, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We do this every single day. Thanks for watching.